This is the solution to the challenge I called Challenge Epic Spies Asset Tracker. If you had a problem figuring out what to do with this, let me just start off by saying the key to this exercise is that you're going to need 3 separate arrays. However, you're going to keep those arrays in sync by the index. So for example, the first time that we add a new asset's name, his or her elections rigged, and acts of subterfuge performed, we're going to use index 0 across all 3 of the arrays. One that contains the names, one that contains the elections rigged, and one that contains the acts of subterfuge performed. Okay, and so then when we add the second one, then we'll add a new index for each of those. So we're going to have to resize each of the 3 arrays and add a new index. Index 1 we'll add the name, the elections rigged, and the subterfuge acts. Okay, so that's really the key. Instead of working with just one array, we're going to work with 3, and we're going to keep them in sync using the index. All right, across all 3 of those arrays. So let me just a short aside here, this is not the right way to solve the problem eventually once you learn about classes and objects and collections. But today, since we only have arrays to work with, I just wanted to kind of drive this point home about working with arrays and resizing arrays with this exercise. Okay, so now that all the disclaimers are out of the way, you'll need the Epic Spies logo from the CS-ASP_023 challenge folder that you can download wherever you are currently watching or downloaded this video from. So we're going to start by creating a new project, which we're going to call Challenge Epic Spies Asset Tracker, and click OK. Empty web forms, OK. And we're going to right click and add a new web form, just like we always do. All right, and we're going to call this default, like we always do. And then we're going to begin to lay out our form just like we always do. So let me start here by grabbing our logo from that folder and dragging and dropping it into our project. Then I'm going to drag and drop it from the project into our main area. I'm going to resize this to just 150 pixels tall. Great. Okay, and then I'm going to create a title asset performance tracker, like so. And we're going to change the size of this and the font. So the font will be Arial, Helvetica, and all that stuff, and then we'll change this to a heading 2, okay, like so. All right, next up we're going to create the 3 input boxes. Here's the label for the first one, the elections rigged, the label for the second one, and then the acts of subterfuge performed on the third one, and then we'll add a button and a result label. So let's go ahead and go to our toolbox at this point, and let's go ahead and double click and add a text box. Another text box, and another text box. We'll add a button and a result label. Okay, and let's start by renaming all these. Let's get rid of the text out of that label. Come on, text. There you go. And we'll call this result label. Let's call this the add button. And we'll change the text on it to say add asset. All right, and then we'll start at the top now with the text boxes and start naming those. And I'm going to call this first one the asset text box, the second one elections text box, and then the third I'm just going to call acts because I don't want to spell out subterfuge every single time I need it. Okay. All right, so now we're done with you. Let's save what we have so far. Hopefully you've got that part. That was the easy part. Let's go ahead and double click and add an asset. All right, so like I said, what we need to do is create 3 arrays and store them in view state, and then retrieve them from view state and continue to store them in view state every time after we resize the arrays and we put new values in. All right, so it's not difficult as long as you watched the lesson number 23. The only hard part, or it's just time consuming to do this over and over again. So, but that's good for you. You need that muscle memory. You need to be typing these sorts of things in. So let's go ahead and get started, and we'll do if not page dot is post back. Right, so we're going to set up the string of assets equals new string, and we'll set that to 0 items. We'll keep an int for account of elections equals new int sub 0, and then a new int called ax equals new int 0. All right, so we have our 3 arrays defined with no items in them at this point, but we need to create their entries in the view state. So view state dot add and assets like so. View state add elections, and then elections here, and then finally view state dot add ax and ax like so. All right, so that's all we should have to do there. Looks like Visual Studio is happy. Now whenever we click the add button, we need to retrieve the values from view state, casting them to arrays of the appropriate type, and then we need to resize each of the arrays. We need to take the values from the text boxes and put them into the newly sized arrays at the highest index, save them back into view state, and then we'll go ahead and clear out the text boxes for the next data entry session. Okay, so let's go ahead and start by grabbing out string assets equals view state assets. Now we're going to have to cast that, and we're going to cast it to an array of string, like so. And we'll do the same for elections. And we'll have to cast that to an array of integers. And then int ax equals view state and ax, and we'll have to cast that to an int like so. All right, is everybody happy so far? Yes, good. Okay, moving on. Now we need to resize. Since we're keeping all the indexes consistent across all of the arrays, I'm just going to calculate what the new length should be, so that when we call array.resize, we don't have to keep going assets.length plus 1, elections.length plus 1, and so on. So we'll just get int new length like so equals, and we'll just go ahead and grab it from assets. If our logic is correct, it should be the same every time across all 3. And this is pretty, I'm not a fan of this code, be honest with you. Again, this isn't the right way to solve this problem ultimately, but for now, this is what we're going to do. This is very fragile code, I think, at the moment. I don't like the fact that we're relying on the same index across 3 different arrays. Things could get all out of sorts. You might forget something here or add something there you didn't intend to, and get unexpected results at runtime when your customers are using your application. But for now, this will have to suffice. Again, sorry, all these disclaimers, but I want to make sure to point that out. We're going to resize each of the 3 arrays. So the first one we're going to resize, we're going to do a ref assets and give it the new length. And then we'll do the same array.resize ref elections new length, and array.resize ref ax and new length. All right, and so now that we've done that, we need to get what the new index will be. And there are a couple different ways we can do this. I'm going to go ahead and do what we did in the previous video, which is we're going to get the new index like so. New index equals assets.get upper bound, and we'll give it dimension 0. Okay, so now we have the new index. So assets new index equals asset text box dot text, right? And then what's the next one? Elections new index equals elections text box dot text. In fact, well, we're going to need to actually int.parse that, right? Because we're working with an array of integers. And then ax new index equals, let's go int.parse ax textbox.text. All right, and then finally we need to stick everything back in view state now that we've culled off the values from each of the text boxes. So view state assets equals assets view state elections equals elections view state ax equals ax. Great. And then finally, well, not finally, actually, I want to print out that result label that we saw in the challenge. And so we'll just do string dot format, and I think it said total elections rigged. Let me go ahead and go full screen at this point and move this over here. So total elections rigged, colon, we'll give it the first replacement character, line break, average acts of subterfuge per asset. It's a mouthful. We'll do that sub 1, and then, and I'll come back to that one in just a minute, don't worry. And then we want to also say, okay, the last asset you added, and just give the name, just so we can work with all three of those arrays. All right, so the first one we want to do elections dot sum. The next one we want to do ax dot average, right? And then finally, the last one we just added. So assets, and then we can get back to it using that new index again, right? And that should give us the name of the last person that was added. All right, so hopefully you got all of that. In fact, hold on, I missed a parenthesis there on the end. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and pull it back out here. You can pause if you need to. And back here, and you can pause if you need to. Okay, and then finally, what we want to do is clear out those text boxes. So asset textbox.text equals double quotes elections textbox.text equals empty double quotes, and then finally ax textbox dot text equals empty double quotes. Great. All right, so now let's go ahead and run it. I'm going to go ahead and save a few moments here. We know that whenever we're taking an average, there's the possibility that we're going to get some large number after the decimal point, or actually a very small number after the decimal point. And so I'm going to go ahead and format that with the N2 format that we saw in the previous lesson. All right, so now when we run the application, we wrote a lot of code and didn't test it, which always makes me a little nervous. I probably should have taken things in smaller increments here, but we're going to go ahead and go Bob, elections rate 3, axis subterfuge performed 5, add asset. All right, yes, that all looks correct. 3, 5, and Bob. All right, here we go. Jim is the next asset. He has rigged 7 elections and only 2 acts of subterfuge. All right, so 3.5 is the average, 10 is the total, and Jim was the last one. And then we'll just do one more here. Bruno, okay. Elections rigged 5, and acts of subterfuge 5 and add asset. Okay, so hopefully you got similar results to what I got. Again, the only trick here was that we had to use 3 arrays, keeping them in sync by using the same index across all 3 of the arrays, using all the techniques that we've learned up to this point with creating arrays and then storing them in view state. Again, just want to emphasize, this isn't ultimately the right way to do this, but hey, we needed a quick example and something you could kind of cut your teeth on, and hopefully you were able to figure this out on your own. But if not, no worries. Hopefully once you got the hint, you were able to finish it up on your own, right? Okay, we're going to continue on the next lesson. Good job. Hang in there. You're doing great. If you got all this under your belt so far, that's a big hurdle to begin with, and then beyond that there will be other hurdles along the way, but we'll stop down and we'll talk about each of those in more depth. So the first hurdle is just getting comfortable with the syntax, getting comfortable with logic, finishing all of the assignments that you're given, and getting a real sense that, hey, I can actually do this, and you can do this. You're doing great. We'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you.